Hey everyone, today let's see if we can stuff this second gen axle into this third gen. Maybe we can solve this axle overheating problem. So this ends up being pretty interesting. Last week I was over at Ty's shop, TCS Motorsports, and we were talking about these axles. He makes these axles because the state of the SW20 axle market used to be this. You'd pay $500 and you'd get something with half a joint that was missing, and the fact that this one isn't cracked is honestly kind of shocking. Everything's rusty, no ABS tone ring for some reason. You know, these things are, they're terrible. And then so you had to buy this, and then you had to do your best to rebuild it with the parts that were available. Now, thankfully, ATS makes an upgraded CV for this side, so you can take care of all that side. If you didn't need upgraded, there was, what's the name of that company? The name's going to be right here because I'm going to remember it in editing. And you could buy just a normal joint from them. You kind of re-grease this one, hope that it was in good shape, put some new boots on it. Thankfully, you can still get the boots from Toyota. And you prayed you were in good shape. Now, unfortunately, these are all getting to 30, at least 25 years old, and you can only reuse this outer joint so many times. So Ty decided to make these available. Now, why we're talking about this on my third gen is he did something that was really cool. Because there's a lot of people swapping these turbo drivetrains into naturally aspirated MR2s, he made, so you probably can't see this, well actually, here, it'll be on the box. See this axle number here? The SWP one at the end? He makes these in the turbo axle, but with a naturally aspirated outer. And the nice thing about that is the third gen MR2 shares the same outer spline as the first gen and the second gen naturally aspirated. So all of a sudden now we have an axle that from here to here fits the third gen. And if you look at this image right here, this is back in 2009 when I had put this motor and transmission into a first gen. The way that I did it back then was with this little, essentially I just took the inner part of a tulip and I took a, this was back before these things were rare. I took one of these drive flanges, I cut them, I welded them together. Holds great. So this will go to this will connect into the EB60. From everything I can calculate, the axle is it's a 4 millimeter difference from what it should be. So that's great because there's more than 4 millimeters worth of travel in here. So it'll still be in the usable range. And then if you look again in this picture right here, I was looking at this and I realized back in 2009, the axle that I used for the passenger side supported axle, it was a second gen. It was one of these with the snap ring. Now, that's not the style that's on there right now, but I remember that bracket was just the bracket that came from the car that I got that swap from. So the 2010 Camry with a manual transmission, right, so it's kind of rare, for some reason uses this old style snap ring with this bearing. All the other ones, they use the newer style. Here, let me get one. All the other ones use this style, which frankly, I prefer working on this style, but for the sake of, Legoing parts together, that's going to be nice. Now, if I remember right, we will have to adjust where this bearing is, I think by 10 millimeters, but we will measure it. So yeah, so let's get to some disassembly, see if we can do this. Oh, and by the way, I spoke to Ty, and I'm now a reseller of these parts. So if you need these axles, whether it's these ones or the proper turbo ones, you can go to my store, you can get them for right there. And another interesting thing to note is for the 2GR folks, see these lines right here? You can also get them from me. Ty has made these silicone hoses available for the 2GR swap in the SW20, which I think is pretty neat. Now, I've only got 3 of them. There's actually a 4th one. The kit will come with 4. I just don't have it on hand. So the other thing I want to talk about before we get too deep into this one right here is I did try to go to the classic solution, driveshaftshop.com. They make some really nice CV axles that are high performance. These are just intended to be stock replacements. They're going to be more than strong enough for this application. I never really had a horsepower issue on this thing. It was simply too much heat, unable to manage that heat and melting things down. So I spoke to the, unfortunately I forget his name, but he was real nice over there at Drive Shaft Shop. But at the end of the conversation, he basically said that they don't have time. I'm paraphrasing, but they don't have time for a custom axle solution right now. And conveniently though, what he did tell me is in all of their high power axles, this is the grease they use. So we went over all of the other things that I did use, and I hadn't used this, and you know, I do believe they make some nice axles. So if this is what they stuff in there, it's worth a little bit of money, and it's worth trying to put in there. So that does mean, of course, before we do any of this, we're gonna have to go in here and race prep this thing. Well, actually, no. I'm gonna test that it fits first, and then we'll take it out and race prep it. So today, I don't have the bracket for the other side, but I do know the sides are symmetrical enough that, you know, from this flange here to this flange here, they're symmetrical enough that if it fits on the left side like we're going to do right now, it will fit on the right side also. So, yeah, let's see if it fits. All right, and we're not just gonna throw it in as is. What I wanna do is I wanna take this boot and this little cover off here so that we can tell how far the joint is plunged in or out to make the decision if this is gonna be usable or not. I guess there's no need to disassemble the whole joint. We can just do that. The other thing we'll do is we'll remove this clip just to make it easier to slide in and out since we don't need it right now. Let's go put this in and we'll be able to see, you know, how far in or out this joint is. Essentially, the neutral position is everything level here. All right, let me get you guys under there. All right, so hopefully you guys can see that properly. It is sitting a little deep in there. Not ideal, but let me take some measurements and then take it out on the bench, and I'll replicate this position so that we can see what the other side of this position looks like. All right. So I went to go disassemble things so that I could show you guys, and I noticed this is stuck. So that might explain part of our problem. If we look under here, you can see that these are hitting right there. So that's unfortunate. But let's take a look at that, and we'll pull it out and we'll take some measurements against the other one, and maybe if we're lucky, that means we'll be able to push it in a bit, well, a bit further on this side so it'll come out on that side. All right, well, it should have been obvious when I first had it out, but this here is smaller than this, which may not matter, but the tone ring, if you can see, the tone ring here is further back and it's a larger diameter. Now, it looked like it was stopping right here. It looks like if that's the problem, if we just knock off this ring, we'll be good. Give me a second to go measure under the car. All right, so it isn't entirely clear. It doesn't look like that should have blocked on there. Let's use the next weapon. We've got this ball of clay here that is good for taking tight, imprecise measurements. So right here, this is the profile we have in there. So that's supposed to fit in here. So that shoulder here, 47, which is, this is significantly bigger. Okay, so the fact that this shoulder is smaller, that's not going to cause a problem. Let's see. 77.8. That'll go to there. You know what? Yeah. Yeah, I am fairly certain that that is the issue, because that needs to go, see the profile here, that needs to sit in here. So, let me grab a quick tool. All right, Let's knock this thing off. Oh. Okay, I wasn't expecting that to be an extra ring there. All right, that's looking great from here. Let me get you guys under there. All right, so this right here is what I expected to see. Technically, the joint is a little bit plunged, maybe by 2 or 3 millimeters, but I am happy with that. That is well within the allowable range of this joint. And I can spin this. There's no binding anywhere. Perfect. So I guess what we need to do now is see how hard it's going to be to grease this joint with the proper grease for racing. And we got to add vents to the boots. So let's get to that. Let's see what we got in here. Huh. All right. So this is real grease. It's not, I'd have no problems running that on the street. It's not that junk that separates as soon as you look at it funny. That blue stuff, or, no, it looks like proper grease. But let's see if we can split that joint and put that red line grease in there. Now we don't know the construction of this joint. This may be the kind that comes apart easy. It may not. We're going to find out. That's not the kind that's going to come apart. It would have come apart by now already. So that wasn't too bad at all. Let's see what we've got over here. A little bit of damage on the outer spline there, probably from the circlip smashing against it. And there's another little bit. And the rest will likely be inside the joint. And that's why when you do this, you're committing to fully cleaning that out, because there's now debris in here. And now a magic cut to clean this up. All right, and now everything's clean and everything's dried up. And we want to weigh the amount of grease that we're putting in there. So we're just going to put everything on here and zero our scale out. All right, and now we start packing the joint. Oh, you know what? Actually, I forgot to check which direction of these was top. So the indicator I'm seeing here is there's this bevel right here. That bevel is likely going to the top, but it's almost entirely symmetrical. And in this case, since it's in a rear-wheel drive application, it probably won't even matter. And the reason for the bevel there is so that it can turn more before hitting anything. In this application, it's really not going to be traveling much, so it probably doesn't matter, but pretty sure. Let's just make sure that it's not hitting anything. Doesn't look like it'll hit anything that way. Let's try it the other way. Probably should have noticed this when I took it apart, but sometimes it's hard to notice these things because it's all greasy. Yeah, it really looks to be about the same depth, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that the bevel points up. Zero that, and let's go. And we're just going to start by coating everything. We don't want the chance of any of this to run dry surface to surface. Oh, and this part right here, this always has a tapered end. So the smaller end goes towards the bottom. And in this case, there's a second tell, there's a recess here. that recess is for the circlip. So you know exactly which way this one has to go. All right, now we start putting the balls in. And you can see I cleaned up the end a little bit because it had a problem sliding that spline on there. We're just going to put the snap ring on. These can be a bit fun to put on. All right, it's in there, and then just a couple light taps and it should go home. There we go. It's locked in place. So put a boot back on. Now, to keep this simple, I'm going to go ahead and assemble this as a full shaft, and we're just going to put it under the car instead of trying to tighten these under the car. Now I gotta go get a full complement of screws and get these all cleaned up. I'll be right back. All right, and now we got some clean hardware and some blue Loctite. Now, I know the right answer here is to safety wire these. And I'm telling you guys that. That way in a month after the race, I can tell you guys that I was being lazy and that I really should have safety wired these. So, let's proceed with the Loctite. I've got to be the fourth, maybe fifth person in history that's ever torqued those bolts. All right, we've got our axle, race prepped, ready to go in. Didn't put it in first gear, it's moving. There it is. All right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go take this thing for a spin and make sure there's no funny noises. All right, well, she did good. No strange noises, no nothing. So I think we're good to go. The bracket for the 2010 Camry with a manual, yeah, bet you didn't think the Camry came with a manual as late as 2010. That should be here sometime this week. Unless there's something special about it, I don't see a reason to make a video about the other side. It's pretty much going to be the exact same thing as this side. And yeah, you know, here's the thing. Even if these axles don't last longer than the previous ones did, these are a lot more serviceable with that joint that unbolts and whatnot, and the fact that I can buy them. That's a huge thing right there. You know, these reman axles, they're kind of a pain in the rear. You got to buy 3 different ones, and one thing that I've been noticing as I've been buying more is you order remans and they'll send you new ones instead, which that'd be great most of the time, except I'm counting on those inner splines. So it's been a bit of a pain, but this will hopefully fix that. And then the other thing I'm hoping for is that the people at the drive shaft shop didn't steer me wrong, and that this Redline CV2 grease here, it claims, what is it? It claims a, yeah, it claims to be usable up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, but the drop point for this grease is 800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ludicrous. That genuinely doesn't make sense to me, but that's what it is. So if that's the case, if they're not lying on that, then that should solve this problem. So anyways, I should get back to the race prep for this. Other things that are coming, I ended up ordering those, they're essentially header Legos. So I actually did work on the Widowmaker a little bit, but I'm struggling to get something to fit in such a tight area. So I ordered those plastic Lego blocks for headers that you could just kind of snap together. It should make it a lot easier to get something in there that's approximately the right shape, be able to play around with it a little bit, and kind of get something that looks like it'll fit. So that's the plan with that one. I don't know when the video's coming on that, but I am actually working on it. And yeah, that's all I got. Have a good one, guys. See you later.